Greetings, movie flicker pickers and podcast listeners. No, your eyes do not deceive you. The title is correct when I said that I'm revisiting a review, but not just any review, but it's the first one that I put out on the pod 7 years ago when this show went under a completely different name. I'd also like to think the quality has improved a bit since then, not to toot my own horn or anything. But I figured that with the wildcard month I've had last month, it would be nice to redo one of my earlier reviews. And it couldn't be more fitting to select the movie that celebrated the milestone anniversary recently. Its 40th, as a matter of fact. That movie is none other than Ruthless People, one of several gems from the comedic pipeline of the 1980s. Here's some factoids about the film. There were 3 different directors involved. Jim Abrahams and the Zucker brothers, David and Jerry, all of whom previously worked together on another classic 80s comedy flick, Airplane. The screenplay was penned by Dale Launer, who also wrote such comedies as Dirty Rotten Scoundrels and My Cousin Vinny. And how could we forget the music involved? The soundtrack features some of the hottest acts of the decade and perhaps centuries ahead. Mick Jagger, who performed the title track and theme, Bruce Springsteen, Luther Vandross, and Billy Joel are some of the names involved. Everyone was there! The movie was released in December of 1986 to critical acclaim and would go on to make over $70 million in the US. With those facts aside, let's get on to the plot. The story revolves around this happy-go-lucky, quote-unquote, married stone couple. The selfish, money-hungry Sam, played by Danny DeVito, and the rambunctious, vulgar Barbara, played by Bette Midler. Scumbag Sam tells his scheming mistress Carol, played by Anita Morris, that he only married Babs because of her family's inheritance, which would be on hold until her father passes away. Well, now that the inevitable occurred, the inheritance is now up for grabs, and Sam plans to be rid of his wife once and for all by way of homicide, while taking the ill-gotten gains for himself and Carol. However, when he gets home, Babs is nowhere to be found. Soon after, he gets a phone call from an anonymous killer who tells Sam that Babs has been kidnapped. In order for him to save his beloved, Sam must pay for the $500,000 ransom or else she's donezo. Oh, and no police and media are allowed to get involved. Of course, this is good news for old Sammy Boy as he doesn't have to worry about killing her with his bare hands, that coward. Later, we get a closer look at the kidnapper, or kidnappers, as there's 2 of them. Ken and Sandy Kessler, played by Judge Reinhold from Fast Times at Ridgemont High, and Helen Slater, the 80s Supergirl, respectively. The couple apparently have a bitter history with Sam as they were previously employed by him and were financially screwed over time and time again, and they've been waiting on the right moment to pounce on him. When they eventually let Barbara loose, they aren't exactly prepared for her aggressive demeanor, and Ken's attempts to calm her down backfires, which ultimately leads to the poor woman being chained to a bed. Surely, one would think that this makes for an easy win for old Sam, but alas, the Kesslers aren't murderers. They're friendly people just trying to get by in life. Their target, however, isn't so friendly as he fails to show up at the ransom spot. Begrudgingly, Ken lowers the amount to $50,000. Once again, Sam is a no-show, so, in the final act of desperation, the ransom is dropped down to $10,000. But the little grunt isn't budging with the money still, and that sinking feeling starts to kick in for the Kesslers. Does Sam really care about his wife? While this chaotic game of whack-a-wife transpires, Sam fails to realize Carol's true intentions. The blackmail him the moment he murders his wife and take the money Sam wants all to herself. And she's definitely not conspiring alone. She's in a relationship with a younger, albeit dim-witted man named Earl, played by Bill Pullman, who is tasked to film the scenery by the hills after assuming Sam has faked Barbara's kidnapping and plans to kill her there. What ends up happening is this. Earl films an entanglement, let's call it that, between a prostitute and her partner. But he mistakes the woman's screams of pleasure for screams of terror, and presumes it's Sam in progress of murdering Babs, which understandably disturbs Earl. His disgust for the purported crime, however, distracts him from checking up on the tape before passing over to Carol. The next day, Carol sends a copy of the tape out to Sam, who immediately knew it was her who sent it, thinking of it as a gift of sorts. He calls her up and tells her,
"Sitting here fantasizing about laying you on your stomach and tuning that big old red up and spreading and folding the big old red and long squirting and farting, squirting and farting, squirting and farting."
No, not quite that. He says that he plans to do the things featured in the tape back to her, which understandably alarms and frightens her when she thinks of murder instead of entanglement. Carol, in a panic, hides out with Earl and orders him to make another copy for the local police chief, who happens to be the man with the woman in the tape. Big yikes for him. The police chief freaks out, thinking that he's the one being blackmailed, and tries to come up with some deal to keep Carol quiet about the tape. She orders him to arrest Sam for murdering Babs, as she thinks the tape would suggest, and the chief happily complies. Another day passes as the chief orders members of the police force to investigate the Stone home, while the chief purposely attempts to slide in some form of evidence that could be used against Sam, only to hear that an officer discovers the chloroform Sam was planning to use earlier in his backyard. The investigation, which actually gets close to Ken during the questioning, is abruptly withdrawn as Sam is arrested. Luckily for Sam, though, he succeeds in getting bailed out of juvie but has to prove that his wife is alive to keep his innocence intact. Meanwhile, Barbara has been exercising during her time being captive and manages to lose 20 pounds of weight. Babs and Sandy immediately form a friendship, despite the former still having some tense interactions with Ken, and Sandy even lets Babs in on some of her self-made clothing. During their conversation, Sandy gives the down low on the ransom between Ken and Sam, noting the final ransom was declined by Sam, upsetting Babs, who loudly exclaims,
"I've been kidnapped by Kmart!"
Later on, Ken returns to find out Sandy has let Barbara go, but Babs returns after reading a newspaper headline exposing Sam's relationship with Carol, finally coming to terms that her husband really doesn't want her around anymore. Suddenly, a real killer on the run from the cops breaks into the Kessler home around the same time Babs returns, and after a tense standoff, the killer accidentally trips and falls down the basement stairs, and he is DOA. Now, the Kesslers and Babs plan to get their revenge on Sam, and with Babs having given intel on Sam's finances, they increase the ransom to his entire net worth, that they know of anyways, over $2 million. Eager to make the next move, Ken calls Sam, who immediately agrees to pay the $10,000 ransom to get Barbara back. Ken tells him the updated ransom, which obviously infuriates Sam, but he has no other choice at this point. Elsewhere, Carol is perplexed to see that Sam has yet to be convicted of murder, so she goes to a video store with Earl to interrogate the tape herself, and shows that the contents are, indeed, of a sexual encounter. But it did sound like bloody murder with the woman screaming in Earl's defense. Later, Sam goes to the bank to deposit all of his money, and upon returning home, he gets a phone call from Carol for the first time in days. During the call, Sam gives her information regarding the location of where he'll drop off the ransom. Terrible decision on his part. The next day, Sam awaits Ken's presence at the downtown plaza, where he gets a personal call from Barbara, making sure that all of the items the kidnapper wants, including the ransom money and his jewelry, are all in a suitcase. Mid-call, she swears at him while bluffing with the claim that the kidnappers are making her say such harsh things to her husband. Eventually, Ken arrives disguised in a clown mask to get the ransom from Sam, but before he runs off, most of the police squad are revealed to be hidden around the area to keep an eye on him. In order to keep the ransom, Ken lies and claims that Barbara is dead, and Sam has to give the suitcase back to him before attempting to run off with it. Unfortunately for Ken, his escape is once again interrupted, this time by Earl demanding the suitcase.
"Hey man, give me the suitcase."
Hey man, who the hell are you and what the hell is going on?
"Don't worry about that, you bum. Just give me the..." Hey, yo, did you just shoot at me?
Man, no, there's cops all around here, dude.
Oh, you must think I'm really stupid, huh?
Due to Earl's slowness, it takes a while before the cops convince him to let Ken go along his way, in which they immediately follow Ken's vehicle with Sam in tow. Ken eventually notices the police are in pursuit, so he drives off a pier in Santa Monica, and the ransom money starts floating out of the water. Citizens take notice and jump in the water to claim ill-gotten gains. Sam angrily demands for someone to get his money out of the water, and out of desperation, he even throws an officer into the pier. Later on, during the search, the police let Sam know that a few $1,000s were able to be recovered, and it turns out that the body in the car that fell in the water wasn't Ken's, but the erratic killer from earlier. At that moment, Sam realizes that a mistake was made, meaning that Barbara could be dead, and he'll finally get what's left of the money all to himself.
Psych!
Seconds later, we, the viewer, can see that this isn't the case as Babs arrives by way of police car. The police quickly asked her to identify if the body found was her kidnapper, and she says yes, all the while making up a story on the spot. Something deranged, something schizophrenic, it's the whole thing. The police, relieved, cleared his case, and Sam is now a free man without any charges. But unfortunately for him, he still has to deal with Barbara, who catches him off guard with a weight loss. The happy couple reunite, breaks bread with Jesus, and embraces each other in one of the most heartwarming, happiest of endings ever.
My detector test determined that was a lie.
Babs gives Sam a generational beatdown before throwing him in the pier, finally being rid of the man who she thought still loved her all these years. With her newfound freedom, Barbara joins Ken and Sandy by the beach. Now, if you're wondering how Ken pulled off what he did, he had the killer's body in the trunk of his car and planned to switch off in case police would follow him. The trio now celebrate with the money, $2 million in hand, and walk off into the sunset, and they all lived happily ever after in one of the most ambiguous polycules cinema has ever seen. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is the movie. So, I haven't seen this since I last reviewed it all those years ago, but for the most part, it still holds up on the humor front, but I think that some of the side plot involving the mistress and Bill Pullman gets a tad bit dull over time, as do some of Bette Midler's activities while in captivity. Regardless, the dark comedy of it all works well. All the characters seem to blend well together, creating humorous one-liners and jokes, with every scene having some sort of importance to the story. Not to mention the 80s aesthetic is interesting to view. That Stone household is one to behold. It's definitely one that I'd happily live in with my partner and dogs and koi fish, if I were alive back then. I would absolutely recommend the movie to fans of the film's leads, DeVito and Midler, and anyone who likes black comedies from the good old days. My rating from my letterbox mirrors how I still feel about this, so I'll give it a 3.5 out of 5 popcorn buckets. And that's a wrap on this revisited retrospective episode. Coming down the line, reviews for Desert Warrior and Spider Noir. To be updated, be sure to subscribe to the show wherever you listen to pods and find us on the social medias. On Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, and even Letterboxd, follow user Pic-a-Flic Pod. That is at PICAFLICPOD. I hope you enjoyed this little revisit, and I hope you stay tuned for the next episode. But until then, this is the Western Wonder, and I'm signing out. Peace, folks.